As the waters begin to recede in Texas, the insurance headaches will begin for those that have insurance. In fact, it's being estimated that only 2 of 10 homeowners have coverage. My next guest has been a licensed public insurance adjuster since 2003, and he's fought for homeowners after dozens of disasters, including Hurricanes Andrew, Katrina, Rita, and Sandy. He's licensed in 10 states, and he currently sits on the board of director for the Texas Association of Public Adjusters. So, of course, we're going to talk about the Texas situation, but I have a feeling as consumers, we can also learn a thing or two from him. Licensed public adjuster Loy Vickers. Loy, welcome to WHO in Des Moines. Thank you for taking the time today.
Hi, Jeff. Glad to be with you.
So, Loy, overall, what would be your thought on, we're hearing that only 2 out of 10 homeowners in the path of Hurricane Harvey have flood insurance. Is it because they're in areas that they never expected to have flood waters in their home?
Well, I think yes, that is part of the problem, but I also think that there's a little bit of a misconception about policies in general.
Okay.
Well, we've had some folks call, even some of my good clients that actually have a lot of properties up here in Dallas, thought that he had flood coverage on one of his houses on the coastline, and he's finding out that that's not the case. So I think there is some education that needs to go on here, because people, if they don't have a separate policy for flood, chances are they don't have flood insurance. And that's a big wake-up call to some of these folks.
You're exactly right, Loy. Even in Iowa, people will find out if they get flooded, they were expecting that their normal insurance policy would cover it, so they're looking under the normal details. You're saying it's very important for people to understand that if they're in an area where there's a possibility of being flooded, they have to specifically buy flood insurance. Otherwise, is it true there'd just be no coverage at all?
That's correct. I mean, it'll be a situation for these folks here in Houston. Usually FEMA and Small Business Administration will step in and offer low-cost loans to some of these folks to help them try to rebuild their houses. But in reality, now you're coming to the realization that you're going to have two loans on your house. And so that's never a good situation to be in. But going back to the education thing, I was first licensed in 1989 as an agent, so I actually have seen a lot more of this than most folks realize.
Sure.
Even in that time frame, the policies that we were selling in 89, 90, and the ones that are being sold today are different because they've made some changes to those policies. So my recommendation to everyone that is within earshot of your radio show, review that policy and find out what's in it. Because if you're just thinking you've got X number of dollars deductible and a dollar amount for your coverage, the time to know what is in that policy is not after the storm happens.
Right. So it would just make sense, Lloyd, just in general as a consumer, to take some time, and maybe this hurricane for folks here in Iowa would give us a heads up that, look, we got to make sure we know what's in our policy specifically. And you're saying it could have changed over time.
Oh, absolutely. We're seeing small changes, but in Texas, what they're doing is they're changing the deductible from a flat dollar amount like $500 or $1,000 to a percentage of the TIV, which is total insured value. Mm-hmm. And so as your value of your house goes up, the deductible goes up as well. And I had a statement showing that on one of my houses that it had gone up considerably this year because we had a big tax jump. And so you've got to review these policies and know what's in them, because when you have a claim like you're going to see in the Houston area, if you don't know what's in the policy and your adjuster's coming out and he's saying, hey, we don't cover for this, we don't cover for that, how would you even know if you've never read the policy?
Yeah.
And so that's where we help level the playing field, because we actually work for the policyholders directly. But there's not going to be enough people to go around after the storm. So it's going to take a bit of time to get some of these things worked through.
So let's talk about that. You are a licensed public adjuster, Loy. So give me a little bit of how it's going to work when people come to a house, when an insurance company sends somebody to the house to assess the amount of damage. How do they arrive at that estimate?
Well, that's a really good question. And, Jeff, I would venture to say that if he's a seasoned adjuster that's been working at this for quite a long time, you're going to get a different estimate than somebody who just became an adjuster last week because we heard we had a hurricane and now there's money to be made and he's an adjuster.
Gotcha.
And so, my first question is when somebody comes to the house is what is your authority? And authority under the terms of the insurance is how much money can you write a check for? And so if this guy can only write a $10,000 check and you've got a house that has basically been blown and washed away, you're at a disadvantage.
No, that is actually a great point. Now, somebody comes to the house and you say, "What is your authority, Loy?" And you, as you've said, you work on behalf of the policyholders. Let's say I automatically start getting a bad feeling about how this is all going to go. What are my options?
Well, first of all, let me be really clear with your listening audience because it's your responsibility under the policy to put your claim together.
Okay.
And submit that to your insurance company. And so if you're not able to do that, then you need to get someone who is on your side who can write a claim the way that you see it. I mean, one of the best examples I can give is people are, they buy antiques and that kind of thing, and an adjuster will say, "Well, what about this piece of furniture here?" And you might say something really innocent like, "Oh, that old thing, we've had it for years." It's an antique. It's worth a lot more than what he just heard because all he heard was the word old, and so he's depreciating an amount off of that, the value of that immediately. You have to be very careful what you say when these guys come out and realize that regardless of how nice they are, and, I'll be the first one to tell you a lot of them want to help as much as they can. In reality, they work for the insurance company.
Right, and that is really the most important point, Loy, that you have to be aware. And you're right, I've dealt with adjusters. I dealt with them after my basement flooded a few years back. They are nice people. They are doing the job. But that seems to be the biggest thing that you have to be aware of is, well, they're going to go back to the insurance company. They work for the insurance company. And one of the things that you're saying is you got to be very careful about what you say to them as you're engaging in friendly conversation.
That is correct.
So let me ask you then, if you get your estimate back from the insurance company and you feel like you've been lowballed, is there any recourse at that particular point?
Absolutely. I mean, if you feel that way, you should contact someone like myself who's a public adjuster in the area to actually review that claim. And just on the surface, we're going to wind up getting 30 to 40% more than you would if you were to put an estimate together just because, we actually know how to do this.
Right.
And so with that being said, you've got to figure what is your time worth because dealing with insurance companies and dealing with adjusters, I'm sure you have a story that would probably go along with that if you've got a flooded basement, takes a lot of your time.
Yeah, exactly right. And I was thinking Loy, just a simple solution, like you're often asked to take pictures of the things in your house. And of course, we do that sometimes because we're afraid that something is going to be stolen from our house. But it would seem like that would be also valuable in advance of a claim like this.
Oh, absolutely. It's almost invaluable because that provides documentation as to what was there beforehand and what wasn't. And there's always things that come up, and people are always skeptical. But, the other thing is I want to be clear with your listening audience is never give the originals away. I know we're kind of moving away from the time of taking photographs.
Right.
There have been instances where people gave the originals to the adjusters, and things happen, and they get lost. So don't do that. Make sure it's a copy. Make sure you keep all your receipts of anything that you may be displaced out of your house so that when you actually do get to the point where you have to put all this together, you have the documentation to do it with.
Let me ask you, Loy, I get texts from folks on my American Toppers and Accessory text line as I'm talking to you, and one question that a homeowner had here in Iowa was, I was under the impression that you can only get flood insurance through the government and you have to live in a floodplain. That certainly you're talking about the general availability of flood insurance, right? Correct?
Well, and that's one of the points. He's actually right.
Okay.
The flood insurance program, NFIP, which is the National Flood Insurance Program, is underwritten by the federal government.
Okay.
And so if you are in a floodplain and you're buying a house and you have a mortgage on that house, there are maps available that tell you you're in a floodplain and require you to have insurance or not. Now, I would be a real strong advocate to say that, hey, if you live in Houston, you probably want to have flood insurance now,
right,
regardless of what the map says. Just because of this event. I mean, 54 counties were affected over the coastline of Houston and Corpus, and it's going to be a monumental event by the time it's all said and done.
And Loy, I've been talking to folks from Texas for the past week, and some of them did say, oh, we just never thought we were going to get flooded, or I thought my house was built high enough to avoid this, the waters. And so people talk themselves out of insurance, don't they?
Oh, exactly. And to be honest with you, I mean, anybody that architects and engineers and that type of thing, any class that I've ever been to on this, they all say that, we designed for a 100-year storm. So what happens in the case of this, where I've heard some terms being tossed around as a 500-year storm, what happens then? Is that 4 times the normal amount of water that we might have in a 100-year storm?
Yeah.
If that's the case, then everybody was at a disadvantage whenever that storm came in.
And as you're saying earlier, and I gave that stat that maybe only 2 out of 10 would have the insurance. So, Lloyd, those are the folks that will probably be going to FEMA and looking for some low-interest loans as well. Now, is there any process for them of determining the damage, or are they at the mercy of whatever low-interest loan they can get?
Well, no, there's going to be a process there as well, because they're going to send FEMA inspectors out to take a look. And I've seen some stuff come across my desk where they were trying to hire as many as 7,000 FEMA inspectors. Excuse me. And so that's a lot of people to cover a lot of territory. But in reality, that's the kind of volume that we're talking about.
That is licensed public adjuster Loy Vickers. Loy, thanks for your expertise this morning. Listeners have been reacting very well on the text line to your comments. Appreciate how you've offered advice that all of us can take, and appreciate your efforts down in Texas.
Thanks, Jeff. Enjoyed being with you.